For a bye week, Tyler, a lot of injury conversation in Marcus Freeman's press conference on Monday. Let's run through some names here. Let's start with Tay Johnson.
Yeah, he's going to be available for the first time this season. And you hear that and you think it's good news for Notre Dame. Obviously, you get a little bit of depth at the safety position, but then you think into it a little bit more. If this is a close game, which Notre Dame is favored by 26 points, and when I saw that line, I was like, holy cow, in what world would two power programs like this ever have that much of a disparity in terms of the betting line? That's a different discussion, but Tay Johnson coming back from his injury, I really don't really see a scenario in which he comes into the fold. So I was a little bit taken aback because Tay Johnson is a name that has been so far off the radar if you're covering from a team perspective. But at the end of the day, it is good news, like I said, to have another healthy safety and someone who in the recruiting process, you can hear from Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly, our colleagues at blueandgold.com. They really like this kid, really good athlete, probably has a future playing in the Notre Dame secondary at some point. But Darren, I don't really see some point being this weekend against Florida State unless, like I was alluding to, Notre Dame gets up by like 30 points or something and you see some reserves come into the ballgame.
The Irish need everybody on deck along the defensive line due to injuries. What about Logan Thomas this week?
Yeah, that's the one where I was saying, okay, here is maybe something that could affect this Notre Dame team in terms of first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, just like the ins and outs of a ball game. Because I did an article last week, Darren, at blueandgold.com, and I said three guys who haven't really played a huge factor in Notre Dame's defense to this point in the season, 7-1, 2/3 of the way through the season. Logan Thomas is one of those guys that I think fits into that category, but could kind of break out in these last four games because he's burned his red shirt. Notre Dame has had all of these injuries along the defensive line, specifically at the defensive end position. I'm thinking if you're looking for a little bit of pass rush, which, by the way, has been pretty good despite all the injuries, he's a guy that you could plug in there. And, you know, we saw it with Boubacar Traore as a true freshman last season where he comes into a ball game and sacks reigning Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams. Like, I think that's a spot that you could put Logan Thomas in and say, hey, go get to the quarterback in this certain package, this certain look. So he was a guy that I was thinking was really going to break out in this final month. But if he's hampered by an injury, all of a sudden you're leaning on, you know, your Joshua Burnhams, your Junior Tui Halamakas, you know, RJ Oben, Bryce Young, those core guys who have got you to this point after the Traore injury, after the Jordan Botelho injury. You're leaning on those guys, and all of a sudden you can't put a Logan Thomas into the mix like I thought maybe you could have.
Tyler, is this the week we might see Mitch Jeter handle the place-kicking duties once again?
Yeah, his case has been a curious one because I go back to the Georgia Tech game where I am in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and I see him come out in full uniform, and I'm like, okay, you know, he's questionable, but I think Mitch Jeter, who's handled Notre Dame's place-kicking opportunities all season, is going to continue to do that. And then all of a sudden I see Zach Yoakum look like the guy who's going to kick, and he did. And then you saw the same thing against Navy where Jeter tries to warm up, can't go. And now I think that the scary part is you have a bye week after that Navy game, and Jeter is still in the same place where Marcus Freeman comes out on a Monday and says, I'm not sure if this guy is going to be our place kicker. So the good thing for Notre Dame, it hasn't mattered to this point. You blow out Georgia Tech, you know, all intents and purposes on the road in a neutral site game, if you will, to win by 18. That's a blowout to me. You didn't need a field goal to win that game. You definitely didn't need a field goal to beat Navy. But Darren, what we've seen is Zach Yoakum missed an extra point. He's missed a field goal. Eric Goins, they put in for an extra point against Navy. He missed that. So Mitch Jeter is your best kicker. He's the guy that you want healthy and kicking, especially if you do get into a tight game. Like Marcus Freeman said, Florida State's 1-8, but they're talented. You know, this is a Notre Dame team that's lost to Marshall at home, Stanford at home, Northern Illinois at home this year. If all of a sudden you get into a tight game against an inferior opponent, you might need a field goal. I think you want Mitch Jeter kicking that field goal instead of your Zach Yoakums and Eric Goins of the world. So interesting that he is still questionable because if he's healthy, Notre Dame has to rely on him as the number one kicker.
Tyler, we know Jordan Botelho is not coming back this year due to a knee injury, but any chance he comes back next year?
Really good chance. He is coming back next year. That's the plan anyway. Marcus Freeman said on Monday, well, let's go back to what Marcus Freeman said, I don't know, a month and a half ago at this point when Jordan Botelho got injured week 3 at Purdue, I guess it was. Marcus Freeman said, yeah, we'll take him back gladly if he wants to come back. But at that time, there's so many moving parts you don't really know. Jordan Botelho has to make his own decision. Well, fast forward now to the first week of November. And yes, Jordan Botelho, if he would like to come back, he can, and it sounds like it's trending that way and leaning that way for Jordan Botelho to suit up for the Fighting Irish in 2025, which would be his 6th season. And a little bit about Jordan Botelho in his 5th season, he was one of Notre Dame's best defensive players. Forget pass rushing, which obviously he was Notre Dame's best pass rusher. He was one of Notre Dame's best defensive players overall. So really, really big to have him back. Like Marcus Freeman said, he will be coming back, it sounds like, for a 6th season.
Tyler, what's the offensive line going to look like this week against Florida State?
The exact same that it looked like against Navy, obviously, a week and a half ago. And that is a little bit of a reshuffling, if you will, because Billy Stroud finally gets healthy. You see him for the first time since that same week 3 game against Purdue that we talked about Jordan Botelho getting injured in. Billy Stroud comes back. You don't know if he's going to take Rocco Spindler's spot. Is he going to take Sam Pendleton's spot at left guard? But you do think that when he is healthy and available, he is one of your best 5 offensive linemen. He needs to play. He ends up taking Sam Pendleton's spot at left guard. So you have Anthony Knapp at left tackle. That's been the case all season long. You have now Billy Stroud at left guard. Pat Coogan, ever since Ashton Craig got injured. Again, we're talking about that Purdue game, a little bit of a house of horrors. You can win 66-7 and you still lose so many guys. That's besides the point. Pat Coogan has been starting ever since Ashton Craig got injured in that game at center. Rocco Spindler retains his starting job at right guard. And then obviously Emil Wagner, I think, has been one of the most steady players, not just along the offensive line for Notre Dame this season, but in general. That's your starting 5. And Marcus Freeman says that there is a chance for, let's say, some things happen before the Army game and all of a sudden Notre Dame needs to shuffle its offensive line again, whether that be for injuries or performance. That can happen, but what you want is kind of a consistency there. And that's what you're seeing from the Navy game to the Florida State game, the same 5 offensive linemen going out there. And I think it's a pretty good one. Like I said, when you add Billy Stroud to the mix, he's one of your 5 best. You got better there, I think. You replaced a sophomore with a junior, a guy who started 3 games last year, for a guy who was starting for the first time this year in Pendleton. So across the board, 5 offensive linemen. I think Notre Dame really likes the spot that it's in right now going into the stretch run of the season.